Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special Pro Soccer Talk live for the World Cup draw. The 2022 World Cup draw is about to start in Doha in Qatar. Delighted to say I'm your host, Joe Prince-Wright, over here in England, and I'm joined by Nick Mendola in Buffalo, New York, and Andy Edwards in Kansas City. Gents, this is epic. I can't believe we're doing this right now. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks for all your comments already in the comments section throughout this chat. Join us. Send us your questions and comments, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can over the next however long this draw is going to take. We know FIFA like to maybe a lot of things are planned for these draws, so we could be here a little while, but we are going to really look forward to this. And to everyone all around the world, thank you so much for joining us. So before the World Cup draw starts, we can already see a lot of dignitaries there in Doha getting settled. It's just about to kick off. Nick Mendola, what are your thoughts on this draw, and how excited are you, mate?
Impossibly excited. This is, guys, I don't know if I've ever really discussed this with you, but the World Cup to me is the one thing I wouldn't trade in the world. And that's why 2018 hurt me so much. You know, I've mentioned before how much I love the Bills and the Sabres and the Chicago Cubs, but there is nothing like being able to rally around a national team on the biggest stage. And we had the underdog mentality for so long. We'll discuss a little bit how I want us to not act that way. But when it comes to this, whether it was sitting up in cafes at 2 a.m. in 2002, getting up that early, or staying up for, at age 20 to watch a World Cup, or whether it was a primetime one when it was happening in Brazil, it is just my favorite thing in sports, period.
And Andy, it's so much better, right, that the USMNT are back in the World Cup after a 3,123-day wait to say they qualify for the World Cup. They've done it again. Wasn't easy, but they got it done pretty comfortably in the end. So that makes it a lot more, well, it just hits home a lot more, right, in terms of the US being able to qualify, being in this tournament, especially ahead of the 2026 World Cup on home soil. So how excited are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm fully aware. None of this is about us. None of this is about me, but selfishly, the fact that the U.S. men's national team is going to be in this World Cup coming up in just 7 months, the fact that I, along with you two, get to cover this team in this entire tournament, it is a dream come true. Obviously, they didn't make it 4 years ago. Was the first World Cup that I was on staff at PST. That was bitterly disappointing. So all through this World Cup qualifying cycle, I've been quietly confident. I thought they were going to get there, but always in the back of the head, because of what happened 4 years ago, the thought of, what if we don't get there? What if we don't get back? What if it takes forever to get back? It was always lingering there. So big credit to Greg Berhalter and this team, the way that they went into this final window last week, took care of business, got done what they needed to do to qualify for this tournament. And I'll just echo a lot of what Nick said there as well. The 2002 World Cup was a big one for me. I was at that young, kind of impressionable age where you start to learn about and understand that the world is a pretty big place, and there's a lot of people and places out there, and that this sport touches every single corner of the globe, and it means something massive to everybody in every one of those places. And I got infected with that in 2002. Obviously 2006 was just wretched as a U.S. men's national team fan. 2010 was incredible, and I think a seminal moment for the sport in this country. 2014, pretty good down there in Brazil under Jurgen Klinsmann, and then 2018, we got a lot of time to make up for this time around. And so I'm really excited to get this draw going. The U.S. being in pot 2, it's going to be a tough draw for them, but I believe with the talent that they have, the growth that this team has had, they can make some noise at this tournament.
Oh, definitely. We'll be talking a lot about the USMNT later on in the show, and obviously they'll be out in pot 2, like Andy mentioned there as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see who they get paired up against, and if there's a good draw, if it's a tough draw, who knows really at this stage. There's still a long way to go until the World Cup. We'll be talking all about that. We've seen Greg Berhalter in his nice suit in Doha. Obviously, he's there on the ground. At the moment, there's a lot of theatrics going on the stage. There's
no kidding.
Spinning around, which I can describe as large fluorescent hula hoops, I think would be the best way to describe it right now. There's a lot going on.
FIFA is happening. That's what's happening. FIFA.
We've got a mix of
way, right?
Yeah, we've got a mix of Dune. There's like a mix of Dune, The Eternals, and what's the movie where the giant worms come? Tremors. Like this is special. This is going all out here.
Mesmerizing. Okay, so while we set things up for the draw, obviously this is all going on stage, and we'll keep you updated with teams that are getting drawn out. Obviously, that's all going to kick off very soon. But I wanted to recap just some of the rules and explain, because it is a little bit complicated. They've changed the way that that teams are put into pots over the last few tournaments in the World Cup. It used to be by regions, but now it's purely based on FIFA rankings. So the teams that are in pot 1 are host Qatar, and then the 7 top-ranked teams in the FIFA rankings who've qualified. So Brazil, Belgium, Argentina, France, England, Spain, and Portugal. Those are the teams that are in pot 1. And then some of the other rules to kind of go over is that only teams from UEFA can be drawn in the same groups. A maximum of 2, because obviously a lot of those teams have qualified. But any other nation cannot be drawn in the same group as someone else from their confederation. So the USA cannot be drawn against Mexico or Canada at the group stages. That's just the way it works. And there's still 3 spots up for grabs as well, with the Intercontinental Playoffs, Costa Rica against New Zealand, and then the UAE or Australia against Peru. And then there's still 1 team from Europe to be decided, with Wales playing against either Scotland or Ukraine. So there's going to be a few draws there where teams may not know exactly who they're playing, but those playoffs are coming up later in the year. And obviously we have a bit longer than a usual World Cup year. It won't be happening in the summer. The tournament's happening in November and through December in Qatar. So I hope I've explained it well enough there that I feel like I need to take a couple of sips of water. But lads, what are you looking forward to most, I guess, before we get into some of the comments and see some of the great comments coming in? What are you looking forward to most? I'm going to start with you, Andy, for this World Cup in particular. Which teams, which players, anything that really you fancy the look of heading into this draw?
Yeah, first off, I just want to say, let's spare a thought for the Costa Rican fans, because I can't imagine watching this World Cup draw today knowing that you're kind of a part of it, but you're also kind of not a part of it at the same time, because you've still got to go through that qualifying. Probably would be torturous, I think, to get excited and ramped up about, hey, we might be in this group in the World Cup. We also might not be in the World Cup coming up in 7 months. So, again, credit to the U.S. for getting qualified automatically the way that they did. I think the number one thing, though, that I am looking forward to at this World Cup, it has to be the U.S. men's national team. And I know that maybe they're not one of the favorites to win it, or they're not even in the conversation to be one of the teams that win it. And I understand that, but I think as we just look at where this program has come over the last 4 and 8 years, I think this could be a really big moment for the sport in the United States once again, because we have talent at a level that I think is recognizable to the general public, if you will, people that are not diehard every single day, every single weekend soccer watchers, Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, whatever you have. The people that know the U.S. men's national team, they recognize a Chelsea, a Juventus, a Barcelona, a Borussia Dortmund. Even having players, I think, at that level, I think brings it home a little bit more, and I think probably gives people a little better sense of where the U.S. stands now in the world's game, and the fact that we have talent to match some of the top teams in the world. We might not have all the depth that they have going down the squad, but we've got some talent at the top end that's pretty comparable. And so obviously it's going to depend on the group, who they get. But I think you have to expect them to get out of the group. And then at that point, it's a knockout competition. Anything can happen. So more than anything, I just want to see a really strong showing from the U.S. men's national team. I want to see them get out of the group, and I want to see them make some noise. I don't want to see them go quietly in the knockout rounds. And I think this is a team that has the potential and I think the mindset to do it. And that's maybe the biggest thing that I see different from 8 years ago when they were last at a World Cup. It almost felt like they were just happy to be there. This time, I think they expected to be there, and I think they know the job is nowhere near finished at this point.
I could talk for hours. I mean, absolutely hours about how important this is for the United States. And there are so many angles to it. The mentality and the expectations. There seemed to be 2 camps after they qualified. One was just happy to be there, or just happy to be back. Not that they aren't expecting anything out of it. And another was, but how do we feel about this team and about this program? And I'm urging a discussion I had online with a friend of mine who we've been watching games together since 2002. And he says, listen, we'd all like to be a juggernaut, but you got to just, embrace the opportunity and be happy to be there. And I want to be at least a CONCACAF juggernaut. I think this is where that's headed. And the amount of resources available to the United States, the talent pool, the young talent pool, how this should be a building block, regardless of how well they do towards 2026 and hosting on U.S. soil. I mean, look how hosts have done more often than not. Look at the boost, whether it was a little shady or not, when we talk about that 2002 tournament for Japan and for South Korea. So for me, this is just a moment of the competition. The draw here is so big for me because there are two things I want. You mentioned what else are we watching? I'm watching the United States, and I'm watching the team I hope they don't have to play until deep into the knockout rounds, and that's Brazil. To allow 5 goals, guys, 5 goals in 17 matches of CONMEBOL qualifying is absolutely insane. Forget scoring 40. So there are teams I don't want any part of. Brazil, France, and there are teams I want a whole big part of. But we know the 9 teams they won't be, right? Because they can't. I'm guessing you can't draw New Zealand because you would be potentially drawing Costa Rica plus the 7 teams in your group. And I don't know. It's exciting.
Very, very exciting. Before we dive in a bit deeper on this USMNT analysis, in the comments, I'd love to hear where you guys are watching from around the world, because obviously we're focused on the US men's national team a lot, but this is going on around the world. Obviously, I'm in England. You guys are all over the States. But I can see a lot of comments coming in from many, many countries. So I think we have some, obviously, US fans, fans from Ghana, Senegal. We have people from Texas, Uganda. Brian G's in the house. This is incredible. So thanks so much for joining us. Get your comments in throughout the show. We'll answer as many questions as we possibly can. We got people from Peru watching, Iran, Morocco, Ecuador, Nigeria. This is impressive. This is absolutely impressive. Our Canada's in the house, of course. Canada, everyone's very excited in Canada about this young team and qualifying for their second ever World Cup and their first since 1986 in Mexico. Uruguay, California, Brazil, Los Angeles, Texas, Louisiana. Dustin's in the house as well. Compton, California. There's a lot of places here, guys. I feel like we could be talking about this all day long. All these great places we want to visit. Isaac's in Memphis, Tennessee. So I feel like now is a good time to just focus as they're going through some of the procedures, talking about the draw and intro on it. For the US, Andy, best and worst case scenarios for the draw, because it's been a tough road, as we said, 3,123 days since we've been able to say the US has qualified for a World Cup. Where are we at with them? What would be a good World Cup for them heading into this? Because they've worked their way back into the top 20 of the world rankings. But what are the expectation levels around the USA?
It's impossible to say without knowing who they're going to play. I think you can say, well, getting out of the group, even if you get one of the giants coming out of pot 1, maybe you write that off as a loss. They were in the group of death last time they were in the World Cup. They got out of the group stage then. So that's the minimum, I think, to me, when you just look at where this program is at. And so I spent a lot of time the last couple of days, and especially this morning as we were getting ready for this, thinking about incremental growth and exponential growth. And I think we saw a lot of incremental growth from this team and a lot of individuals throughout the World Cup qualifying cycle. As they learned what World Cup qualifying is all about, the demands and challenges of CONCACAF, and actually having expectations on them at the international level for the first time for a lot of these very young players. So I think those are all necessary pieces of the puzzle to get and to have that incremental growth. But now that they're there, now that they're qualified, I want to see a few individuals and the team collectively make a leap. I want to see some exponential growth now that they've gotten through the hard part of the process. And I think when you look at kind of the overall makeup of this team, the age profile that they have, and there were some stats floating around on Twitter, and I apologize for not having the name of who put it out there, but some of the stats about the age of the U.S. men's national team, the third youngest average age of 196 countries that attempted to qualify for the 2022 World Cup, the third youngest, just over 23 years old average age. And when you think about it, they're starting multiple teenagers every single game. They're starting multiple 20-year-olds every single game, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds. This is a very young team. And we've said that a million times, and so we don't forget that they're young. But I think maybe sometimes we forget what that means, and what they haven't been through, what they don't know yet. And I think they learned a lot of that. I think they went through a lot of that, and having those experiences with the talent that they have now, I think the mentality that they have always had, the drive that they have always had, I think you put all of those things together, and I think that's where the exponential growth comes from for this team, if it's going to happen in 2022. And I don't think we've seen anything to make us believe that it can't happen. It might not, but I think it can for this team, because the talent is there to the level that it needs to be, to the level that it has never been before. And they went through qualifying. They did it the right way. They did it the hard way a little bit, but I think they're going to learn a ton from this. And I think I'll give you one name who I think is going to have a really big 7 months leading up to this tournament, or fingers crossed, hoping he will, and he'll be healthy to do so, and breaks out at the World Cup. I think this is going to be the year of Gio Reyna. I really do. The 3 appearances he had during this most recent window, he was lacking a little bit of sharpness. It wasn't quite coming off, but the ideas were there. The aggressiveness was there immediately. And I think he's just a different level. I think he's a different character to anybody else in this team. And so if they're going to make a deep run, I think Gio Reyna has a really nice 2022 and tournament. And that's exciting. That's really, there's so many reasons to be excited about this team, and that's just one of them.
And I want to, before we get on to the next topic, just remind everyone in the comments, you can watch this live on Peacock in the USA. The World Cup draw has started. There's, as I said, lots of musical performances, a lot of singing, a lot of dancing, great stuff going on the stage. They haven't got to drawing the teams out yet, but head over to Peacock and you can stream that live while you watch us as well, and obviously join in the conversation and send in your questions and comments. So, Nick, obviously the US kind of snuck in the end, finished third in CONCACAF behind Canada and Mexico, above Costa Rica on goal difference, but it was already done really with that draw away at Mexico late in the qualifying cycle. What do you think about some of the discussions, shall we say, about the US being in pot 2 and being perhaps the favorable team for teams in pot 1 to get? I think most teams in pot 1 are thinking we'd like Mexico or the USA compared to, you know, Germany or the Netherlands or Denmark or some of the other teams in that pot. Do you agree with that? And are the US kind of underdogs in that regard, that teams already seem to be writing them off? And I feel like that could really favor them in the draw, that they're being underestimated. And they are quite young, and they are very young, like Andy said. So they have no fear going into this tournament. So what's your thoughts on that, mate? Because I know famously the English media definitely underestimated the USA in the 2010 World Cup, and that didn't end up well for us.
Well, listen, I'm looking at Idris Elba was on our TV screen here, our screens here. And if Stringer Bell, right, from The Wire, I think the U.S. has to hope to be like a Marlo Stanfield, the young guy on the block who's going to come in there, be a little more ruthless than most because he feels like he has to make his impression. So my hope is that they get – it's not even about the group. It's that the first match of the group isn't someone who kills them. But going back to where Mexico and the U.S. is, I don't know how you could argue with thinking making fun of the U.S. would be one thing. Making fun of Mexico would be another thing. But you look at these other teams, and Denmark has had a run in them. Netherlands has done the same. Germany has won big time and is one of the deepest countries in the world. Switzerland beat the U.S. just last year. Croatia has a World Cup run in the last one. Uruguay is a fantastic team. So I think the U.S., maybe second to Mexico in terms of the actual teams, should be the one that these pot 2 teams are. In fact, I think the United States is probably a little bit fortunate they aren't a pot 3 team. I think there are teams in pot 3 that would still be more would generally draw more fear from the opposition than the U.S. I mean, I look at Serbia and Poland and Senegal. So I get it. I do. I think the U.S. has a lot to prove, even regardless of age. And my worry is, are we in a position to take advantage of a team? Because I don't think anybody in that first pot is going to be scared of the United States at all. But I also don't think they're going to look at them as a walkover. There was a time that the USA was viewed as a walkover. There is no way. Maybe going back to that Confederations Cup run, now you don't see that team. It's like when Mahrez really broke out with Algeria, you knew you were going to have a fight on your hands. No one's sleeping on them.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of that there. I will also say, though, I think the U.S. has the widest range of outcomes for what their tournament's going to be, given the age, given the inexperience, given a lot of unknowns. I think with this team compared to a Netherlands, a Denmark, who just went to the semifinals of the Euros in the summer, Germany, or Nick, you named them all there. But I also think, while they could be easily the worst team out of those 8 at this World Cup, I think they could be one of the best as well. And so the range of outcomes for this team, I think, makes it terrifying for anybody that draws the U.S. And I think that maybe will become a little bit clearer in the minds of, maybe it's England, who knows, whoever it is that comes out of pot 1 and gets the U.S. I think they will kind of come to the realization over the next 7 months leading up to this tournament that, well, maybe it's not going to quite be as easy as we think it is, because the U.S. is certainly closing the gap, obviously having qualified and everything. And it's about that growth. And that's the word I keep coming back to. And process was the word that I thought about a lot during World Cup qualifying, because it is a process. It's not just a process to qualify, but to have a team in a situation that you can then go into the actual tournament. You know who your best 11 or 14 or 15 players are. You know who can come into each position on the field and fulfill a role and duty for a game or two. You have the depth. You have just the understanding of working together, every single individual. And I think that was the process that they went through for World Cup qualifying. And it was a good process. It was a necessary one as well for a team at this age. And so I just see so much potential from this. And maybe none of it comes true this year. Maybe they get 0 points in the group. They fall flat on their face and they're out after 3 games. Maybe that happens. That's in the range of outcomes. But I just think that there's so much more to come from this team that if I was England, Joe, and I'm going to throw it back to you. How would you feel about getting the U.S. coming out of pot 2 for England versus, say, some of the other teams? Obviously, it could be Germany because you can get the second European team in there. But I wouldn't want the U.S. I truly would not, because I just think there's another level that they're going to hit in 2022.
Maybe this is biased because obviously I live in England and from England, but I've spent many years of my life living in the USA and go back and forth, and obviously have a huge connection and admiration for what the US has done in recent years to rebuild the program. And yeah, I would want to get them if I was England, to be perfectly honest. I think you're on a hiding to nothing because you're expected to beat the US very easily. I remember thinking ahead of this draw how far the US team has come. And I was at Wembley in 2018 in November, where a reserve England side beat most of this US side that we see now 3-0, and it could have been 5 or 6. And I think about how far the US has come over the last 3.5 years since that friendly. England have obviously improved a lot as well, but I think it would be a really tricky game, and one that they could drop points in very, very easily, where you look at Denmark, the Netherlands, Croatia. Some of those teams are coming perhaps in Denmark and Croatia, in their case, towards the end of their cycles with the players and the talent that they have, and just kind of hanging on and getting into tournaments. And England have beaten those teams at recent major tournaments at the Euros as well. So I'd rather personally get them. But again, I don't know if I'm biased because I've watched the USMNT very closely build this young squad, and I'm very high on their ceiling. And I don't think they're anywhere near, like you said, Andy, the potential of where they can get to. So, Nick, do you want to jump in here? I think you might have a point on this.
I did. I think they've got a huge potential for the young and dumb part of it. They're very confident. The biggest games they've had to play, with the exception of the game in Canada, they've won, and they've beaten Mexico. The best team they've had to play besides that Switzerland game, they've beaten them or been better than them. That's the one thing we haven't really spoken, because we've been waiting to do this show. That draw at Azteca for at least 65 minutes, it was like the most, not necessarily the best they've performed, but the most ascendant I've seen them away to Mexico. And that may say something about Mexico, but I thought they were in control.
Yeah, they were in control, but there were shades of, I think, what Berhalter wants the new team to be in terms of the way they played, with possession and a little bit more aggressive attacking. But there was a lot of kind of that old school, I don't know, I guess 2002 probably, and 2010 as well. They grinded out a lot of games. They had a hard-nosed mentality that they could go into tough games, and they believed that they could maybe not win games, but they could battle all the way to the end. And that's one thing that we did not see from the U.S. men's national team in the 2018 World Cup qualifying cycle. We saw it a lot in Brazil at the 2014 World Cup, but that was exciting to me as well. And I'm glad you brought that up, Nick, because again, that's just another part of the growth and another piece of the puzzle that if you're going to go to a major tournament like the World Cup and have success, you've got to have that. And I think it's just, they just keep checking things off the list, going right on down. And I just find it hard to look at the U.S. men's national team where they're at right now and think that Greg Berhalter hasn't done a really solid job. You know, maybe not magnificent, maybe not perfect, and you can bicker about some in-game tactics and substitution patterns or rotating the team how he does. But look where they are, and the potential to still do more, I think, is still there.
They're just showing on the screen ahead of the draw highlights of Diego Maradola's incredible career and the hand of God against England. And I mean, what a goal the other goal was, but still, every time that goes in, that still leaves a mark. Okay, I want to throw this to the comments and to you guys as well. Thinking ahead to the USMNT starting lineup now, because we can do that because we know they're going to be in the World Cup. How many spots are really open in that team? Because I was thinking about this earlier, and I think there's only really 2 spots open, I would say, in the starting lineup, and we pretty much know the starting 11. I don't know if we want to go through, guys, and sort of say our starting lineup, and maybe in the comments you guys come in and say if we're wrong or right. But I think Zach Steffen and Matt Turner in goal is kind of a flip of a coin, really. But probably Zach Steffen will get the nod if he does play regularly. I think potentially, but maybe that's discuss.
I didn't love what I saw in the Costa Rica game from Steffen.
Bad.
I know
it was bad.
He's not played a ton, and so he's not sharp, and he's probably not fully fit, and he's been injured, and I get it, but it worried me.
Yeah, he needs to go out on loan, right? I think this is the time now where before this World Cup, he'll need to go and play somewhere regularly 2 or 3 months. He's not going to get that at Manchester City above Edison. So if he gets that move, which he could in the Premier League or elsewhere, then Zach Steffen, I think, gets a nod. But yes, some comments we can see coming in from Jay Hennigan, Turner. So let us know, Turner or Steffen. I think the back four.
Can we just? I feel like there is a really big chance for Ethan Horvath. He's at Nottingham Forest. He's playing every week. He's been loved by multiple Champions League or a Champions League club and a Europa League club. I was really surprised he did not start against Costa Rica, given the penalty heroics to come off the bench against Mexico. So I think it could be any of the 3. I think Steffen is way better than we saw him this window, but unfortunately, the lasting memory for a lot of U.S. fans is going to be him at maybe the worst we've seen him. I think he's a very good goalkeeper.
Yeah, and I think the one thing the US never has to really worry about is goalkeepers, right? Over the years, that's the one position where you know you're going to have a couple of really good options. Mario there says it's for sure Steffen, so I agree with you, mate. Thanks for being on board the Steffen hype train. I think right back Sergino Dest has got that lockdown. Left back Anthony Robinson. I think we can all agree with that. Mm-hmm. I'm intrigued to see some of the comments about the centre-back pairing. I think that's still a little bit up in the air. I think Miles Robinson and Zimmerman have really been excellent in the partnership and against CONCACAF teams, and they've played in the Gold Cup and obviously in MLS, and they know how to get a job done. But guys, do we think that someone else can make a late run? We talked about Chris Richards. Nick, I know you're a very big fan of him. Is there anybody else that sticks out to maybe be starting in Qatar in November for the US at centre-back?
I think I would be surprised if he starts the same centre-backs in every game. And I'll be interested to see. This is where I'm kind of counting on Berhalter. I think we might see a back 3 when you're not playing against a team that is, and that's something that he would love to break out as a surprise as well. And in that instance, I would not be surprised to see U.S. fans looking at John Brooks in two in the middle in a 2 center back situation, not pleased. He plays left center back and has freedom to be that long passing guy at Wolfsburg. Now, is his relationship broken down with Berhalter? Maybe. The advanced metrics, if any of you guys don't watch the Bundesliga, just look at the numbers behind how Chris Richards has been at a 21-year-old at Hoffenheim. I watched the game and I was like, wow, I think he's doing really well. And I looked at the numbers and they are upper echelon for a 21-year-old. So again, I think you want your center backs to have a little bit more experience, Robinson and Zimmerman, I would play against any team where you think it's going to be a scrap. But I would not be surprised to see any of those 4 players in there, again, assuming that Brooks didn't, light a flaming bag and leave it on Greg's doorstep.
Wow, just got to take a moment to let that sink in, that comment. I think the midfield 3, right, Andy, is pretty much set if they're all fit. McKennie, Adams, and Yunus Musa, or potentially Gio Reyna could play in that 3 as a more advanced player, depending on what I'm going to get onto. Is the key area for me. I still don't think the US have found their number 9 and a central striker, and that's the biggest concern. And I don't really know where that's going to change and who's going to come from nowhere to start at the World Cup. I think Pulisic obviously starts left wing. Tim Weah probably starts right wing, but this is where the Reyna kind of situation. Do you actually play Tim Weah up front in the number 9 and play Reyna out on the right to kind of just get all 3 of your best attackers in the lineup at the same time? Or do you have Reyna as one of the midfield 3 and then Pifok or Jesus Ferreira or Ricardo Pepi? I think that's probably the way to go, right? And have Reyna and Pulisic. It's difficult. There's a lot of really good players there.
Yeah, I'm gonna. First of all, Reyna in central midfield. No, I don't want that. I like the balance that exists in there, and I like the balance that still exists when Kellen Acosta comes into that midfield as well, as he had to do for a couple of games during this most recent window, because Weston McKennie out for the rest of the 2021-22 season with that broken foot. And so I think that area of the field is really well settled. I actually like pushing Pulisic for the national team, because we've talked about this with Chelsea ad nauseum last season. I think, after Tuchel took over. I actually kind of want to push Pulisic over to the right side, because he'll sit a little bit narrower in the way that the U.S. plays in possession. Serginho Dest is going to get forward a lot in overlap. So you're not asking Pulisic to be a winger. You're asking him to sit inside just a little bit, kind of off the shoulder of whoever the center forward is going to be. And I think giving whoever, if it's Ferreira, if it's Pepi, if it's Pifok, it doesn't almost matter if you've got Pulisic and then Reyna, who I would put on the left, doing the same thing, similar to what Pulisic does, tucking inside as well. You've got combinations, you've got triangles from those 3 in there to create for one another, off of one another. And so it's not all about getting chances to the center forward like it is for a lot of teams. And we know that's not a strength for this U.S. men's national team. And so I just think that puts arguably your 2 best attacking players in Pulisic and Reyna in a close area together, supporting the weakest spot on the field at center forward. So I think that's a really smart way to go forward, because the midfield is really solid behind you. You know that Dest and Anthony Robinson are going to bomb forward, and they're going to cross 5, 10, 15 times in a game. And so then I think you can give a little bit more freedom to Pulisic and Reyna and let them kind of take over games the way that I think we hoped they might do a little bit more in CONCACAF. We didn't quite see it because both of them had some injury issues. Both of them had some fitness issues. It just didn't quite click. But I think at the World Cup, if the U.S. is to reach the peak of what they can do, I think that's a pretty good formula.
It's funny, Joe, when we started this, Joe, my hope was, I hope the draw happens soon, because I don't know if I can talk about how I feel about this team until I know who they're playing. And now I just want to get all stuck in on this. And as we watch the continued dancing and singing on our screens, it gives us that opportunity. I love the idea of Weah up front. I hadn't really thought about it at all until Clint Dempsey said it. And listen, every time that dude's on TV, he becomes more and more my spirit animal, because he's just so ornery. And I get excited because when we've seen Pulisic now, we've seen him as a player. I think of the shoving match and players having to get in the way. The fact that he's probably not going to be the captain for every game because of the leadership council, but also because they almost need him a little unhinged. They need him in that Wilfried Zaha, I've been fouled 7 times because I'm the guy here. They don't want to have the ball. And the one thing that I want to point out lineup wise, I think we learned a lot from this break, because when the chips were down, he went for it against Mexico with his best team, even with McKennie and Aronson not there. And when the chips had to be down again, even though it was a 6-goal situation, there's 5-6 players who started all of those games. A bunch of them went the distance. And we learned a lot about his trust factor. And we also learned to keep an eye on Luca de la Torre moving forward, because he became a very, very trusted piece of clearly of what Berhalter sees.
Definitely. A lot of the people in the comments are bigging up De La Torre, obviously, the likes of Brendan Aronson, who we haven't even mentioned, and he was one of the star performers for the US throughout all of World Cup qualifying before he got injured for that last stretch of games. And I think obviously he's going to probably end up at Leeds United in the Premier League next season if Leeds stay up as well. So he's going to have a big 2022. So just to update everyone, you got Jermaine Genius, Carly Lloyd is on stage. There's a lot of big names now. It looks like we're getting very, very close to the start of this draw, guys. So send in your comments, everyone watching again, where you're watching from, where you're joining us from. Thanks so much. I've got the globe behind me just to help with some geography lessons as these teams come out. And of course, I'm here in England, Joe Prince-Wright, your host. Nick Mendola's in Buffalo, New York. Andy Edwards is in Kansas City. Thanks for joining us, the Pro Soccer Talk crew, for this live show around the World Cup draw going on in Qatar right now. And if you head over to Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com as well, there's live analysis and reaction during this draw. We have the page there with details on every single thing you need to know, has the links to how to watch this draw live on Peacock, and of course, where you can click to watch us as well and get your questions to us. Okay, we got Joe Morris is in Grand Rapids. Daniel is in Canada, the Cinderella story. I think we agree with that. Amazing to have Canada in the World Cup. Argentina, Pittsburgh, PA, my old town. Great to have you joining us, Joey. Roberto is in Mexico. New Jersey, that's where Stephen is. And Christopher Wiggs just says USA. I assume he's a big US fan and somewhere in the USA.
How unusual.
Oh, yeah. We got Morocco in the house. So we got, wow, just everywhere. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And as we get towards the draw about to start, I want to ask you guys quickly about the US before we switch focus and actually focus on the teams coming out. What is the best case scenario draw for the USA, Andy Edwards? Because it can go one or two ways, really. I think. What teams do you think the US would really fancy playing against and would match up pretty well against? Because that's a big thing, right? Even with the FIFA rankings, it may not actually matter because you might want to play a higher ranked team because you think, you know what, our skill set and our players, we match up better against the likes of Poland compared to Serbia, for example.
Yeah, obviously Qatar coming out of Pot A or Pot 1, I think being the host is the one that everybody in 2, 3, and 4 wants to get. If the U.S. could pull that off, I'm just looking at the list here. Tunisia, if we can avoid Poland, I think coming out of 3 as my number one hope, I think they can set up a pretty good group. But I'm looking at 4. There are some tricky teams in Pot 4. I want none of Cameroon or Ghana or Ecuador as well. Any team that I know, right? Like that would be the rubber match, right? The trilogy in the group stage. I just think I don't know. I think African teams at the World Cup get so underrated. And we were talking about this a little bit before we came on and started the show. They always get underrated in terms of the FIFA rankings or however they put together the pots. And then that's the team that kind of makes the group of death, if you will. And it was certainly the case in 2014, US, Germany. Okay, you throw Ghana in there and you've got Portugal as well. And it was just an absolute nightmare. So I think everybody's probably hoping for either Saudi Arabia or the Asia, South America playoff winner. And that's not great. It's going to be a really tough tournament. I believe this is going to be a really, really tough tournament. Maybe the best field of teams that's ever been at a World Cup, because I'm only looking and seeing a couple of teams in there that I think, okay, that's an easy one. That's 3 points in the group stage.
Nick, what about you? What's the sort of, I guess, worst or best case scenario for you for the US? Who do you want to avoid, or who do you fancy taking on?
So believe it or not, there's a part of me that doesn't want Qatar because I want the intimidation factor to be there. I want a sort of sense of where we are. Plus, you can't get 2 Asian sides, right? So you could still draw one from 4. And frankly, I'd rather play a UAE than the hosts. And I also look at this tournament and where it's being held. Those Northern African teams are not far from home. There's been part of me that we'll talk about this on a show before the tournament, Joe, but I really want to see some more guys, even if it's a loan from MLS, go over for the last few months and get acclimated to being closer to the country. So for me, there's a big part of me that kind of wants to get someone like a Portugal or an England, someone who is going to be there as a target, but maybe a target to take some points off of, and then give me UAE or Saudi Arabia. And then in pot 3, Tunisia is a little scary, but maybe I want South Korea. Maybe I want someone with a little bit of a scare factor because of Son, but overall a group of defenders that I think we can beat and a midfield we can win. So I guess if you're asking me right now, I would say South Korea, UAE. Oh, we can't get that. Excuse me. So UAE, Tunisia, the United States, and give me England just for the banter.
Yes, we love the banter. We love the banter here, and that will be banter all year long if that is the case between all of us. I can already see in the comments a lot of people kind of want Portugal or England, maybe. That would be some of the better picks from pot 1. And yeah, some of the other selections in terms of, let's open this up to the comments, because who do you guys want to avoid or want the US to be drawn against? Because I think there is some, when you look at a team like Poland, if you can stop Lewandowski, there's some good quality players there, but I feel like the US would match up pretty well with their speed against Poland's backline. With maybe, they are dangerous, but I feel like that would be a team that they can get the better of. But yeah, I wouldn't want to, if you look at the pots and in pot 4, I just think Ghana or Cameroon really stand out for me, that teams that I do not think would match up well for the US, and they should hopefully avoid getting those teams. And then in pot 1, Brazil or Belgium.
Well, nothing to do with them.
Yeah, that would be bad news for the US. So hey, we're nearly there. We got Timmy Cahill on stage for the draw. There's Jermaine Genius is up there running the show. We are nearly there starting the World Cup draw. So thanks everyone for joining us. Remember, you can watch the draw live, stream it on Peacock. Head over to Peacock if you're in the USA. You can watch it live there. We're getting closer and closer to the World Cup draw in Doha in Qatar. And just keep sending your questions in. Michelle says Mexico all the way. So obviously a big Mexico fan there. Guys, a word on L3, because they finished above the US in qualifying in CONCACAF. But I think a lot of even Mexico fans would agree that they were outplayed by the US over the 2 games and weren't exactly happy with Gerardo Tata Martino and his tactics. Andy, what do we expect from Mexico? Because they're in pot 2 as well. So I think a lot of the pot 1 teams will probably be thinking, yeah, Mexico, we could have a go at them.
Yeah. It's really strange what Mexico kind of went through during qualifying, because I think if you look on paper, compare them to the U.S., the talent is pretty comparable. I think it's pretty similar. I don't think there's a ton of differences in there. But I think in terms of having everybody pulling in the same direction, having a coach who I think they know is going to be in the position for the long term as well, and that they're building something rather than being kind of in win mode right now, I think is a little bit different for the 2 teams. And I think maybe that's where, just they ended on same spot there in the standings. But it felt like they took such different routes to get there. Everything was so positive about the U.S. and about the growth and everything. And I just think because Mexico is such an older team at this point, the expectations are to win right now. And so it's a little bit more difficult. I don't know. I was not impressed with Mexico in the 2 games that they played against the U.S. I thought it was 2 of the best performances the U.S. has ever had against Mexico. And to do it down in Azteca, with 3 games to go in World Cup qualifying, needing a result to do it, and you go in there and you get a result, you're the better team on the whole of 90 minutes. I came as impressed as I came away by the U.S. I was that worried about Mexico going into this tournament, because Tata has been on the hot seat for, depending on who you ask, 6 months, 12 months at this point. And so, if they don't perform well in friendlies coming up in the summer with 6 months to go, 5 months to go before the tournament, are they going to move on from him? Probably not at this point, because they got through qualifying and they're now qualified. But I don't know. It feels like the time is not right for Mexico to be going into a major tournament like this. Whereas with the U.S., everything feels like it's starting to come together at that right moment.
Okay, so then we have some people in the comments asking about Canada as well, Nick. Our opinion of them. What do you think? I mean, you're based very close to the border, the Canadian border up there in Buffalo. You've watched this team grow. They were very impressive in qualifying, right? And I think that they are the team that everyone doesn't really want to get in pot 4. Obviously, the US can't draw them, but all the other nations around the world are saying, yeah, we do not want Canada because they are very, very dangerous.
Won the group without Alphonso Davies for what, 60% of it, 50% of it.
Wow.
They're a very good team. They are together right now. It's funny, John Herdman, a Sunderland guy, right? He has a very angsty, ornery, feisty Northern England team on his hands, and they've gotten performances out of players. With all due respect to Alistair Johnston, who I don't think is near the level, but is finding a role in a system, in a mentality, and an attitude. So listen, I think for different reasons, Canada has also one of the more accomplished goalkeepers from outside the Big Five leagues in Europe. Orhan's fantastic. I mean, he is a very, very good goalkeeper. Jonathan David is nasty as well. So I wouldn't want anything to do with them if I were someone looking at that fourth pot. And just a word on Mexico. Over the octagonal, give me them whenever, and I'm not scared. But over 3 times in 9 days, is Hector Herrera and Memo Ochoa going to be able to rally themselves and steal this team, STEEL, to maybe steal STAL a point? I think Mexico can have a tournament. They've got the experience. It's a last hurrah. The next cycle, for them to do it at home, they're going to go through what the U.S. is going through right now, and only hope to be as successful.
Okay, so update. There are teams coming out of the pots and the balls now. Qatar's coming out. They're in A1, Qatar. We already knew that, so the formality has been concluded with them. I want to highlight one comment from Anthony Vlahovic. He's made some really good points here about Reyna playing up front for the USMNT and how having Pulisic and Tim Weah out wide and then Reyna kind of floating in the false 9, that might be the best way to get Musa, Adams, and McKennie in the team as well. What do you got to think about that? I think that's a really smart comment. So, guys, if you're making smart comments in the comment section, we're going to highlight them and talk about them. So keep them coming. But Anthony, great points there on Giovanni Reyna. You made several there. I believe you, mate. I really think that's a good idea and probably the best way to get all of the USA's best attacking players and midfield players in the team at the same time. What do we think, gents? Who wants at it?
I do think it makes sense. I right now don't need Ferreira or Pepe to be anything other than more than a wild card. I need a absolute monster who's been in big games on both sides of the ocean, international and both sides of international and club. So the idea of Reyna being there as an absolute menace, or perhaps if you are going to bring him off the bench, which we've seen even when he was the best player on the U20 team at the World Cup, he was still at times brought off the bench because of the players he was with. So I do like the idea of using him at all. He's not going to be put off by the stage. That's the one thing I love about this kid. He's been there since he was in the womb. He pointed out the other night in the post-game press conference, like he was at the 2002 World Cup because his mother was set to give birth to him in about 3 months. So I love what's going to come out of Gio Reyna. I love what's going to come out. As shout out to MLS, to that New York City FC Academy. There's a team that had James Sands, Joe Scally, and Gio Reyna. So credit to Claudio Reyna for helping to put that system in place. I think they're very dangerous. And look, we may see Aronson and Reyna in the Premier League for the last few months before that. I think there's a really good chance we see that.
Absolutely. And guys, the draw is going on right now. It started. Qatar have been drawn into Group A. England have been drawn into Group B. Argentina into Group C. And now France have just come out. So obviously they're going to Group D as well. So for the first pot, it's pretty, I wouldn't say not interesting, but obviously, there isn't anybody they're going to be playing against right now that we know of. But in a few minutes from now, it's going to start to get really interesting, right? When we see who's coming out of pot 2 and where the US can end up. So obviously the US can end up in any of these pots right now when they're coming out of pot 2. But while the draw's going on, I think it'd be really good in the comments, everyone watching and listening. Who are your favorites to win the World Cup as of right now, before this draw, before it happens? I'm sure we may have a different favorite after the draws happen, depending on if they get a group of death or something like that. But guys, just let us know in the comments. Who do you think is going to win it? Ibrahim says Senegal is going to win. I think. I think. Well, that's obviously the African champions beat Egypt, which is no mean feat in the playoff in the AFCON regionette, and of course with the help of some laser pens as well. We have to say on home soil in that penalty shootout. But yeah, the teams are coming out, and it's all happening thick and fast, gents. So France, to recap: Qatar in Group A, England Group B, Argentina in Group C, France are in Group D, and Spain are in Group E. So, gents, before we get to the comment section, who are your favourites to win it all? Andy Edwards, do you want to go first?
I've been thinking about this a lot. I did the England thing for the Euros last summer, really close to getting it right. I did it a few years ago at the World Cup, close to getting it right. They got to the semifinals. They got to the final this time around. Do I go one more and pick England to actually win? I think it's an England. I'll give you three teams right now: England, Belgium, Brazil. And I know I'm picking three teams from the very top of pot one, but I just look at where these teams are in their progressions and their timelines. For Belgium, I think it's a win now moment because I think they're going to have a lot of players aging out of the national team here as soon as this World Cup ends, probably. Brazil, Nick highlighted it earlier, the dominance that they had during South American qualifying. And then England, I think, is kind of a mixture of both, where they've got a lot of players at the prime of their career, but they've got a lot of young players at the early stages where there's still a lot more to come from them. There's still more growth and development, and players like Phil Foden and Declan Rice who can go up 2 or 3 or 4 more levels at a World Cup and really, help this England team go all the way. So I think between those three, if you give me those three, I'll let you have the rest of the field. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, Joe, I'm with Andy in a lot of different ways. Brazil and Belgium are both very scary to me. There's a sneaky bit here in that Brazil and Argentina have spent significant time in Qatar, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe it's more than I'm thinking, but a lot of their friendlies have been staged over there. I just don't want Brazil. It's the one team I don't want. I've been feeling like, just to say it before it gets out there, because they're drawing Group H right now. They're putting Portugal there formally. So we have all of our seeded teams put into their spots. But I've been feeling like the U.S. is going to get messy. And that's with an I. And then hopefully it won't get messy with a Y. Look at me in the wordplay, guys. I think it's going to be Argentina and USA. I just got that feeling. As we see Carly Lloyd on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is when it's starting to get really interesting, folks. Obviously, the entire pot one teams have been pulled out now. Qatar in Group A, England in Group B, Argentina in C, France in D, Spain in E, Belgium in F, Brazil in Group G, and Portugal are in Group H. So we know now those are the teams. And I think looking at that, you may say that actually for England, being in Group B, usually that means you are one of the first teams to play early in the tournament. So that may actually suit them to kind of get off and running, just hit the ground running, make a bit of a statement. It worked out well for them at the Euros this past summer gone by. So, yeah. Okay, the Netherlands have been drawn out. Okay, here we go. Now it's go time. Netherlands have been drawn out. And let's see what group they end up in. But this is really, really interesting now.
Oh, I believe it's going to go in order. Yeah, here, A4, huh? Is that? Oh, I'm sorry. I think I'm a second ahead of you. Let me reset. But I've ruined it for you. It's going to be the Netherlands and Qatar. I'm sorry. I think I jumped ahead.
Well, no, you're all good. This is a live event. These things are going on as it's happening. So, as you heard it there first from Nick Mendola, the Netherlands got the draw that I think most pot 2 teams wanted. Every pot 2 team wanted
from not qualifying last time, just like the US, just like Italy, to they got the group that everybody wanted to be in.
Louis Van Gaal will be very happy. The USA are out.
Here we go.
USA are out. Let's see what happens here. This is going to be really interesting.
I want
Let's go.
E or
Let's
H.
go.
E or H.
Let's
Spain
go.
or
No, it's happening.
Spain or
It's
Portugal.
absolutely happening, boys.
Oh,
We're going to have ourselves a PST situation here. England and the USA. Mark them down in the knockout rounds. USA right now. Group B winners. Book it.
It's happened.
It's happened.
It's happened.
Oh my God! And Joe has already predicted that England won't lose a match and they're going to win the whole tournament. So
how often did I tell you this? How often have I been saying this the last few weeks? And
buzzing.
England.
I'm buzzing.
I've absolutely said this. Oh wow!
I'm so excited. We might get fired, Andy. That's how excited I am. We may
Banter
not
will be
last the
coming.
tournament.
The banter will be coming thick and fast for sure,
Oh, my
guys. What do you think
goodness.
about that reaction live? Andy Edwards and Nick Mendola, take it away. USA playing.
We were going to get a
Already
big
booing
boy.
Harry.
Yeah, it was going to happen. I think matchup wise, I think raw talent, England probably got as much as anybody there in pot one. They've got the international experience from 2 major tournaments in a row that they've been to the semifinals and the final. The U.S. has none of that. England, obviously, massive, massive favorites for this group. And if they don't win the group, I think with 9 points, it's a big disappointment from England. That's my personal opinion right there.
I'm already booing Harry Maguire. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I am booing him. I'm going to boo him at the weekend. I'm going to fly and follow him around just to get him off his game. No, I don't like this whatsoever, but I also like that the U.S. will be clear underdogs here. I'll get to get real angry with England because their media is so dismissive of Americans. So, like, this is, Joe, this really couldn't turn out better for us because if we lose, it's like, yeah, you're England. What do you want? And if it's anything other than that, it's like, ooh, you guys, geez, birthplace of soccer. Is it coming home? So just be ready. That's all I'm saying. Mexico and Argentina, by the way.
Mexico and Argentina in Group C. And then I believe Denmark have just been drawn with France in Group D. Is that correct? So that is going to be an absolutely stacked group as well. France and this European Championship semi-finalists from last time, Denmark, who have been really, really good in qualifying. So some blockbuster draws already, gents. And in the comments section, we have a lot of interesting comments coming in. Obviously, talking about the history between England and the USA. And of course, they met at the 2010 World Cup. And I was a soccer player in college in the US, grew up in England. And I was reminded of the Rob Green mistake for approximately 2 years after that fact. Had Rob Green jerseys hanging up in my locker when I got back that summer. And as the only Englishman on the team with 25 Americans, I tried to hold my own, but that was very difficult after that 1-1 draw in the last World Cup. Some teams are coming out again. Germany are playing against Spain in Group B.
I would have taken Spain. I would have taken Spain or Portugal. Obviously, I don't know. I feel like they're in points in their transition, I guess, from a generation to the next one, each of them, that this might be the right time to play them 2 years from now in the European Championships again. They might be favorites going into that, but there might be a small window right now where we could have caught them, I think, and maybe had a little bit easier draw than against Spain. I'm thinking more about it. England might be the toughest draw for the U.S. because they don't see them often. They've played Brazil within the last few years, between friendlies and had them at Copa America a few years ago. They've been in the Gold Cup as well, I believe. So I look at the England matchup and see the elite talent at the top level, and that strikes me as just being the toughest matchup maybe that the U.S. could have gotten. It's great for the banter and it's great for the narrative and the storylines and everything, and obviously the PST derby that we'll have here. But I would have loved to have gotten Spain. I really would have.
Well, I look at England and all of the teams. I think I would have told you I want the team with the worst center forward. Like that's my fear is how our center backs are going to react to world-class level. And you're looking at Lukaku. Neymar is not a center forward, but Richarlison and whoever else they put out there. Portugal's going to have Ronaldo there. We know that. Spain, there are some question marks. It's been Oyarzabal. France will have Mbappe or Giroud. England's got Harry Kane. I think he's a real problem. I think that was probably a good moment for John Brooks, if we're talking about it, for the experience level there.
To catch you up on the draw, Croatia have been drawn against Belgium in Group F, and Uruguay have just come out of pot 2. And if my math,
they're going to be moved to H.
Correct, they'll be moved to Group H to play against Portugal. So Suarez going up against Cristiano Ronaldo. That's going to be a pretty tasty match, pardon the pun, with Luis Suarez. So this is going to be this is going to be really, really interesting. I can already see some of the comments coming through, by the way, about the England-USA draw. Spencer, it says Pulisic is going to destroy Maguire. Count your days, England. That's what Logan has got to say. And Eric Sierra says the US might have a chance. All depends on who else is in that group. So, yeah, there's so many great storylines already swirling, and we're only at pot 2 of the World Cup draw, guys. It was a lot of slow build-up, but now we got going in the draw. As you can tell, I'm fired up about this, and I cannot wait to see how this develops. Okay, Switzerland. Oh, poor Switzerland. They've been drawn in Group G with Brazil. I feel like they play each other a lot at these major World Cup tournaments. But they have a good team, Switzerland. So Brazil.
Shaka's already been shown a red card. I feel like they called him up. They just showed him it already.
Really solid defensive team, Switzerland. Them against Brazil, nailed on 0-0 draw in the group stage.
Okay, so there we have it. Some good predictions. I'm just seeing as well some of the comments about when the England-USA game, apparently is going to be the day. Is it day before or the day after Thanksgiving? That's the schedule for that game when that'll actually be played. So think about that in the US, that sort of week of celebration. Yeah, at home with the family, celebrating Thanksgiving. And the next day you have another gift, potentially, US fans, because you may get a big result against England. That will really get things going in the World Cup. But that's something just to keep on the horizon. And at Pro Soccer Talk at NBCSports.com, we'll have details on the full World Cup schedule, how to watch all these games on Telemundo in Spanish, our Spanish language partners. And of course, we'll have you covered throughout the World Cup here at PST with coverage on all of the teams. Okay, so now we have the pot 3 teams coming out. Iran are the first team to come out. Let's see where they can go in, because they can be in. They can be in B though, right? With England and the US. So, is that where we're going with this now? I believe it is, right?
I think it is.
Wow. Jeez. Sorry, I'm just taking a moment.
No history between those nations at all.
Oh, yeah, every tweet and joke that was put out there when the pots were announced about give England or give the US the banter group, it's happening. It's really happening.
They are B2, so I believe that means England will open up against Iran at the World Cup. B1 against B2. Sometimes let's see the schedule and when that gets confirmed. But my word. To catch up on the draw as it's happening right now, Qatar and Netherlands in Group A, England, Iran, and USA are in Group B. Argentina and Mexico are in Group C.
By my count, there are now only 4 teams that the U.S. can get, because they cannot get Costa Rica or New Zealand. They can't get UAE or Australia, who plays Peru. They cannot get Saudi Arabia. So 5, and they can't get Canada. So it'll be Ghana, Cameroon, Ecuador, or Ukraine, Scotland, and Wales. And I'm just going to say, whatever happens, that's not good. That's not what you wanted out of that group. Maybe Cameroon you want for a little bit of variety's sake. Ecuador, I think they've got a decent record against. I want nothing to do with the team I think that's coming out of that European playoff, and that's Ukraine. I would not want to have those guys together in a situation that is obviously going to be extremely emotional, but also I think they're the best of those 3 teams. So, guys, it's we're about to in for a fight. Everyone's going to hope the Iran game is first.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think avoiding the likes of a Senegal or a Serbia as well, with Vlahovic, becoming the star that he is, Poland, South Korea, who we talked about earlier, I think you can, you got one of the bottom half teams probably out of pot 3. And so if you get one of the better teams out of 4, I think it sets up quite okay for the U.S. There will be interesting, difficult, tough tactical matchups, I think, in this group, because each of these teams, certainly Iran and England have very, very different styles, and something that the U.S. doesn't see a lot of. But I think this is going to be a manageable group. And I think it's going to be something the U.S., again, to use a word that we've talked about a lot throughout qualifying, they can progress. As the group stage goes on, they can progress and build and grow from game to game to be at kind of their peak maximum performance once they get into the knockout rounds. Ooh. And as we all know, that's what it's all about.
Oh, Mexico and Argentina are joined by Poland.
That is already developing as the group of death, right? Group C. That is Mexico fans. Let us know in the comments how you're feeling about this, because that is a horrendous group to be chucked in there. Wow.
Ooh. I mean, it's really tough.
Messi and Lewandowski, Mexico's defenders,
and Raul Jimenez.
and Raul Jimenez. Talk about a star-studded group there, guys. I mean, wow, I can see in the comments there, Mexico fans are just, maybe not. Maybe Gerardo Martino can maybe just move on before the World Cup, or maybe he might.
Guys, I got you there. That was mission, right? Yeah,
that was the mission. Okay, Serbia have been drawn in Group G alongside Brazil and Switzerland, so that's another sneaky good or bad group. Which, if you're Serbia or Switzerland, I think you're not really.
See what I'm saying, Nick? We could have been in either one. Like there's a lot worse out there.
I want nothing to do with Serbia. I want nothing to do with Serbia. I mean, Mitrovic with Fulham this year is literally rewriting the championship record book. They're a tough team. They're a complete team. I actually like them. I'd rather play Switzerland than Serbia. I think Serbia's got a good chance. They've played Brazil recently too. Was that the last tournament? I don't know if I'm mixing up my teams. I think Serbia they were my dark horse the last tournament and got very unlucky. So I'd be very careful about them.
Guys, this is getting really crazy now. Watching this draw, this is so interesting. All this build up, all this long wait we've had.
Yeah,
this draw is delivering. This is going to be fireworks in Qatar here. Okay, we got Group D, Tunisia, Adjoined, France, and Denmark in Group D. What do we think about that?
Kind of a fun game for the French, I guess. I think Tunisia is one of those teams that's either going to lose all their games or shock everybody. It's a feast or famine situation. Because of the way things are drawn, there'll be some mystery around. Guys, you think there'll be mystery around the U.S. and Canada as well, with being in the other hemisphere, being far less paid attention to in Europe than South America? Do you think that there might be some out there going, well, we don't know a lot about the U.S., or will it just be a EASY situation there?
I don't know. I think that they're more prepared now, England, for the US. I think a lot of the players obviously playing in Europe and playing in the Premier League and elsewhere. So I really do think that this is going to be a really tight group, Group B. Just watching some of the other teams come out. Japan have just been drawn out into Group E. So they'll be playing against Spain and Germany, right? Is that correct?
I love that group for watching games already. I love that. You tell me that that's going to be, prime viewing, and I'm not going to debate with you. Guys, my legs are like moving. I am so excited. I am like buzzing right now. A lot of nervous energy. I'm going to have to go outside and shoot hoops or something after this.
Okay, Morocco's come out now. So sneaky good team. Hakimi, obviously, Sofiane Boufal. Some really good players. They had a good AFCON tournament and were pretty unlucky in that tournament not to go even further. So let's see. They're in Group F with Belgium and Croatia. So another sneaky good group. And like we said before, with the way that the World Cup draw set up now with the rankings, but each pot, very even, right? Very evenly good across the board. And I'm looking at, Group B for the US. I think it actually could have been a lot worse, like Andy said. You still feel that way, Andy, with the teams coming out elsewhere?
Yeah, I totally agree. I still think that. And I'm looking ahead now because the U.S. is in Group B. We can start to see their path through the knockout round. So going into the round of 16, assuming that they advance, they finish second, they'll get the winner from Group A, which, not guaranteed to be easy. But if you get a group that has a Qatar in there and a Senegal, you don't have a second, true proper giant because you got the host nation in that first spot. I think it gives a little bit of advantage and a better pathway maybe into, say, the quarterfinals. And so Netherlands going to be tough, Senegal going to be tough. But if the U.S. can really acquit themselves well, I think against England, the confidence will begin to grow in this team. That will be kind of the moment that everybody will have circled on the calendar. But it's going to be about that slow progression throughout the tournament to be at their best when they get into the knockout round. So everything, I think, what could you complain about for the U.S. with this draw right now? I think because the group stage teams are going to be manageable, and the path into the knockout rounds also.
I'm going to go ahead and say they're going to lose to England. Trent Alexander, the way that I've seen the U.S. deal with crosses, I'm a little bit worried about trying Alexander Arnold whipping balls in there. So I'm looking at this group right now. Whoever they draw for that is going to decide whether I think they're going to go through. That really is what it comes down to, because I think they'll beat Iran. It would be stunningly bad. This has happened with Iran at a World Cup if they were to lose to them. So I think they're 1-1 right now, and this is the one that tells me if I think they're going to the knockout rounds.
Okay, pot 4. It started. We're nearly there, gents. Nearly finished the draw. The last group of teams are coming out. We have the Intercontinental Playoff 1, which, obviously there are the 2 Intercontinental Playoffs between Costa Rica and New Zealand. And then the other one is based on the UAE against Australia. Whoever wins that game playing Peru. So they've gone into Group D with France, Denmark, and Tunisia. So it's going to be interesting, right, to see who makes out of that playoff. And this is wild. So if you're not already watching or following along on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com, as you can see, we're updating the page as it's going. You've got my reaction there to England, Iran, and the USA all being drawn into the same group. We're updating that page. We'll have schedules, how to watch information for the 2022 World Cup, which of course starts in November, runs through that lovely month in the full time in the US, and it ends in December, just before the festive period. And the World Cup is just the week before Christmas. Okay, Ecuador, been drawn out. A lot of people in the comments have been calling for Ecuador. A lot of love for Ecuador. And they did really well in South American qualifying to qualify fairly comfortably ahead of some really big nations. So now it's starting to become a bit clearer. And they've gone into Group A. So potentially the US could play against Ecuador, Qatar, Senegal, or the Netherlands in the last 16. So, gents, I think US fans will be pretty happy with that, right? In terms of potential last 16 path.
Yeah.
There's 3 teams that can go through there, and I think there's 2 teams that can win the group as well. And so that sets, again, kind of projecting for the US. I think it sets up pretty nicely.
Well, Nick? We're going to see basically, I think the next African team drawn or European drawn is going to be, they're either going to be the playoff team or because we've just seen Saudi Arabia, and they'll go into Group C.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, they'll go into Group C. So the next name that comes up that is from Africa or Europe,
it's going to be Ghana, isn't it?
It's going to be.
You think so?
No, it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's meant to be. I think someone was saying that in the comments time and time again as well. So fair play, whoever was saying that earlier. It's got some big Ghana fans. Everyone's saying the Netherlands are the big winners from the draw so far. Would we agree with that, being in Group A? No disrespect to Senegal and Ecuador, but Qatar, obviously the host. You never quite know, right, in terms of the hosts, but
they were good at the Gold Cup last year. It's probably wrong to overlook them. 1, as you say, Joe, as the host, and 2, as a team that has progressed a ton in recent years, and they look good at the Gold Cup. They were by no means a pushover.
Oh boy.
What's Nick seeing here?
I believe I'm seeing the second playoff team has just been drawn. So not the European playoff team. So we're going to see them in a group with Spain, Germany, and Japan. And I think that is UAE, Australia, or is that right? Is that the second one? Or Peru?
Peru, yeah. This
is a group. That is a group.
So we also know the opening game of the 2022 World Cup will be Qatar against Ecuador. So that is, interesting game there for Ecuador. I think that's a game where both teams will go for it and say, we've got to win this game to try and get through the group, because they know they have Netherlands and Senegal afterwards. So I think that sets up very nicely for the host nation there.
Yeah. As far as opening games go, that's about as consequential as it can get when you look at this group and see what's at stake and what's available to everybody. A place in the round of 16 is available to everybody in this group, and I think that makes for really, really entertaining stuff.
I think it would be really good news, guys, if they get the European club instead of a European team instead of the African teams, because you might get England maybe a little bit juiced if it's Wales or Scotland. I think that could be a nice little distraction. And it is, isn't it? Yes. The European playoff team. This is a tough group, but it's not the worst group.
It just got tougher, but it's manageable. It's manageable in a way that we thought 2014 was not at all. I mean, think about what that group was and the fact that they got through it. Obviously a completely different team, a different coach and everything, a different time in the sport, in the country and everything. But this is not the most difficult group that the U.S. has ever had in a World Cup. I still think they get out. I think they finish second behind England. I don't know about you guys.
Oh,
If you're Greg Berhalter today, you were hoping to be able to watch less games. The only thing you wanted was not a playoff team there, right? And I think the Scotland or Wales part would benefit the U.S., but if it's Ukraine, I hate it. I think that I am going to go ahead and say it. I fear that game. Yarmolenko is a great leader on that team. He's a good player. They're a hardened team. They've obviously gone through the wildest X factor this year with what's going on with the war. So it's going to be brutal. It's going to be funny, again, not to be all over the English media, Joe, here, but they really should be saying this is easy now. But they won't, because they don't want Scotland and Wales to be mad at them.
This, for me, is as close to a dream draw, I have to admit, with all the narratives around it. The USA and then Scotland or potentially Wales, or Ukraine could make it through as well. But I think Wales with Bale and Scotland, how they did at the Euros, are probably favoured potentially over Ukraine. And obviously, it's a very tough situation for Ukraine right now with a lot of their players not being able to play for their club teams. I think they would be everyone's second favourite team at the World Cup, right, after your own nation. If they did qualify, everyone would want them to do well. And obviously, we send our thoughts and prayers out to everyone in Ukraine and what they're going through right now. It'd be great to see them at the World Cup. But for me, as a Brit and being a resident of the US, this draw is just absolutely bonkers, to be honest. So England, USA.
Well, how about the opportunity to get Scotland in the group stage back-to-back tournaments, 18 months apart?
I was at Wembley for that Euro 2020 group stage game between England and Scotland. A lot of kilts, a lot of bagpipes, and a lot of whiskey. That's the way I'd sum it up best.
Do you think Weston McKennie will fist fight Scott McTominay? That's the question. They're two of the most intense players in every game they play. So I'm signed up for that. Here's Canada. Canada is the only one left now. Am I right? Yes.
Yeah.
It's Ghana, Canada, Belgium, Morocco, and Croatia.
There you go. So I think we're pretty much set, right, with the draw, guys. So let's just reset a little bit and just Canada, the very last team out. They go into Group F with Belgium, Morocco, and Croatia. And Ghana got pulled out against Portugal, Uruguay, and South Korea in Group H. So there it is. We have the World Cup draw. I think a round of applause. I don't know what we're doing, celebrating. I think US fans are probably celebrating out there with that draw. Let us know in the comments section what you think. And yeah, this is going to be really interesting in terms of just how it all plays out now. Now I'm focusing on the schedule, who's playing who when, who can play who in the last 16. But gents, the World Cup draw, to run through it one after the other. I think that's now what we want to do, right, in terms of who is playing who. You could see it there on the bottom of the screen, the ticker going along. So to recap it, Group A, Qatar, Ecuador, Senegal, and the Netherlands. Group B, England, Iran, USA, and then one of Wales, Scotland, or Ukraine. Group C, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Poland. Group D, France, and then one of the international playoffs, which I believe was, let me get this right. I want to get it right. That's the UAE, Australia, or Peru. And then that's Denmark and Tunisia. Group E is Spain and then Costa Rica and New Zealand with Germany and Japan. Group F, Belgium, Canada, Morocco, and Croatia. Group G, Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon. And Group H, Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay, and South Korea. I did lie down after saying that. Of course, you can see it underneath there on the tickers going along. Gents, what's our initial reaction to that draw? Nick Mendola, I want to come to you. What's the toughest group there drawn out? Do we think it is? I think it's got to be Group C, right? In terms of Argentina, Mexico, and Poland. Do you think that's the toughest group?
Oh, boy. Sure I do. No, I honestly, I don't want any part of the Spain, Germany, Japan group. Japan is always a wild card in these tournaments. They're the ones where we know the least. One of those teams we know the least about. So that scares me. I can't, guys, I'm flummoxed. I can't think about anything other than the United States group. And the thing I keep thinking about is I thought with Berhalter getting them back that they were in a 2-cycle coach situation now. And looking at this group, if they don't get out of the group stage, they are going to have a new coach for the second group. And this, I think the pressure is now absolutely huge, even if it's Ukraine, who I think is the best of the three. I think this was a day that the U.S. isn't just going back to the World Cup, but if they live up to their ability, if they choose the right squad, they should be expected, as Andy said, to finish no worse than second here. And who knows, if the England-U.S. game is last, we should be talking about them going into a game that's must win for the group and the potential to play the second place team from a winnable side. So even if they get out of the group, we're looking at the best group that I think you might want to pick to play in the next round, even though Sadio Mane is lurking there. So I don't know if you guys agree with me, but this was a day that the U.S. and all of the expectations should be no less than getting out of the group.
Andy, what do you think about that for the USM team? That draw worked out very well. You've got to be happy with that, right?
Yeah, group stage and then round of 16 progression, I think, sets up well. I'm looking at Group G and Group H down at the end, and those are going to be, H is going to be 6 absolutely incredible, highly entertaining games between 4 really good teams. And then Group G is going to be 6 really, really tough, dogged defensive affairs between some teams that are probably not good enough to beat Brazil, but teams that play in a way and have history of playing together in a way that will be very difficult for Brazil, I think, to break them down and to beat them. And so Brazil might come out of the group stage looking like the least impressive of all the giants in this tournament, but they might actually be the best prepared, the best steeled to steal a phrase from Nick from earlier. He got it out a little better than I did. But I think coming into the knockout rounds, they might be the team that has been tested the most during the group stage of those favorites to win this tournament. And so they might come out in a really good position there because, I mean, that group with Serbia and Switzerland in there, 2 very good defensive teams. You've got the X factor that is Vlahovic up top. He's just gone to Juventus as if he didn't move in the middle of the season and has just continued to do what he was doing before. And Cameroon, I think, a very, very sneaky, underrated team that's going to get in there and cause some trouble as well. So Group G and Group H, I am so glad. And you replace any of those teams with the U.S. and it probably looks like a group of death to us. And so to have avoided that, and I know I said Portugal earlier before I knew the rest of the group, but to have avoided that, I'm very, very happy for the U.S. men's national team.
And Nick, I mean, how do we think in terms of the opinion of the favorite for the World Cup? Has that changed at all with this draw? Are we looking at the likes of Argentina being in a pretty tough group, or Spain, Germany, England? Who are we looking at here? Brazil, obviously, you've got some tough teams there to face off. Have we changed our opinion on who the favorites are to win the 2022 World Cup?
No, not really. I think Brazil's group is really tough, but I do think they're that good. France, to me, has as good a chance to come back and win back-to-back World Cups as we've seen in a long, long, long time. With respect to Denmark, who's a good team, I think most people would expect France to be better than them. Tunisia, and then the Asian CONMEBOL winner. I'm looking at them right now, and it's very difficult for me to see them not being a favorite. And I think you now have to, and I'm not just doing this, Joe, for you. I think you have to put England in the discussion. If they win the group, they'll get the second place team to come out of Qatar, Ecuador, Senegal, or the Netherlands. And that's not easy, but I would expect them to be standing after one knockout round.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but you said it. But I think this draw for England, again, I'm open for ridicule when people can bookmark this video and say no, but that was a very good draw. I'm seeing the reaction from the British media. That was a very, very good draw for them. You can see it there. Group B, England, Iran, USA, and then one of Wales, Scotland, or Ukraine. British derby. I think Brazil will be pretty happy with that draw. I think France generally be quite happy with that as well. And Argentina could probably negotiate that. But I do feel like England did pretty well at that draw and going to finish in the top 2 of that group. and then I think have a pretty favorable route to the last 16. So it's going to be really interesting, guys. So excited for this World Cup now based on the draw. And we're going to have so much more coverage over at Pro Soccer Talk at NBCSports.com later today. And until between now and November, when the actual tournament kicks off, I cannot wait for this. It's been
Joe,
really, really so exciting. Go ahead, Nick.
Can I say one thing? I know the producers have a comment ready that I saw. And this goes out to our guy, Handsome Eric. USA fans are the only ones who want an easy road. Top teams don't care who they play. Facts. Oh, alternative facts, baby. Like, this is that every team wants the easiest road. And yes. I think you get into cliches here. You have to be very, I don't know. I am a stubborn person. And I always, to be the best, you got to want to beat the best. Yeah, if they're in your way. But if you can put me in the final today, I'd rather be cold and just have one game to win. I cannot. Sometimes a comment just leaps out you. And Handsome Eric, I like that you use the K at the end. I think maybe we could have a good conversation over a beer. But the all caps facts is too much for me. Too much for me.
There's a lot of facts flying around right now with this World Cup draw, but the fact is it's done. It's in the books, and we can now look forward to it in November. Get your comments in on the draw. Again, I want to see what people think about the USA's draw in Group B with England, Iran, and then one of Wales, Scotland, or Ukraine. And then what maybe you think about the favourites as well. We said our favourites. England did well out of that. Like Brazil and Spain probably feel okay about where they're at. But yeah, what are your favourites there in the Netherlands? The Netherlands. I've got some questions here coming in. So we're going to finish the chat up now with some Q&A, lads. We've been doing a lot of talking here in our analysis, and everyone else has been joining us. Yeah, Netherlands are going to be competitive. Can we discuss that? It's going to be tricky, right? If they win Group A, if it is the USA or Scotland or Wales, they have to come against Virgil van Dijk and co. That's going to be tough, right, Andy, for the US to potentially get past the Dutch if they do make it out of the group?
At the risk of saying something that might come back to bite us later, I think of all the other teams in Pot 2, that's maybe aside from Mexico, I think they're probably the one that I would have wanted to have gotten in the knockout rounds. So if U.S. finishes second, they finish first, that's who they will play. I think that's probably an ideal matchup when you consider how, not untested, but there will be questions, I think, about the Netherlands coming out of the group stage that haven't been answered yet because of the quality of competition that they've played. Whereas when you look at the rest of these groups, I think we will learn more about some of the other favorites and some of the other, Pot 1 and Pot 2 teams that actually have a chance to win the World Cup. So that's not the worst setup, I think, in the world for the U.S. And real quick, because I don't want to forget this, Joe, your path through the knockout rounds for England is going to be France in the quarterfinals or an Argentina or Poland or Mexico. More likely it's going to be France in the quarterfinals, which is a bit of a tough one.
It's tough, but that's okay. I think I'd rather play France than Spain or Brazil. We're on the other side of the draw. So yeah, I'll take that. Let's look at some of the other questions coming in. Okay, a bit of a negative. D. Kakarika says, no way the US makes it out of that group. Couldn't even close the deal of a win against Costa Rica. Oh, talk about poking the old bean.
All right, let's talk about the U.S. in the most recent international window. You can say close the deal against Costa Rica in one game, but it was 3 games in that window, and they had to close the deal of qualifying over the course of 3 games. And because they did what they did against Mexico in Mexico and what they did against Panama when they eviscerated them down in Orlando, they put themselves into a position where they didn't have to win that last game. They didn't have to draw that last game. And so I think that's being very, very picky and choosy with the things that we determine to assign value to and how we kind of rate this team. I completely disagree with that. It's taking such a short-term approach with the U.S. men's national team. When you look at the first 13 games of qualifying as well, yes, the final game was a disappointment. But over the course of those 14 games, they got themselves into the World Cup, and they had high pressure situations at the end in the final 3 games. They got to win and they got to draw in the first 2, and that's effectively what they needed to get into the World Cup. So and the injuries as well. Let's not forget about the players that were out. Weston McKennie out for the rest of the season. Serginho Dest out for this window. Matt Turner out for this window. Chris Richards was unavailable for this window. There were Brendan Aronson unavailable for this window. There was half of the starting lineup, the team that cemented its place and made themselves starters during the World Cup qualifying cycle, not going into the cycle, but almost all players who made themselves starters during that time and took starting spots from more established or more heralded players, they were unavailable for all three of those games. So I can't agree with that because what they did in those first two games was so impressive from the U.S. men's national team. And again, to go back to that word, they grew, they progressed, I think, in those two games. They faced a disappointment in the last game, but I think it's going to make them hungrier as well as they go forward.
I like this line here from Elijah because I really do think England, in this situation, depending on how the schedule breaks out, they will have a different focus than they would have had for any team that is Wales or Scotland's level. And they're not bad. I hope it's not sounding like but any team that's at that level, Joe, I mean, you can attest to this. It's great to have you on this in this call. They're going to pay more attention to that than say if it was another equal European team, because it's the neighbor situation. It's part of the expression, the big brother situation. I think that's good for the U.S.
That will dominate those two teams for months ahead. If it is Wales or Scotland that do qualify, that will just be the main focus for those two countries for the World Cup group stage. And I think you're right. Maybe the eye will be taken off the ball a little bit when it comes to the USA and Iran, because it's so close to home with Wales or Scotland. I think Wales would probably give them the edge to qualify over Scotland and Ukraine right now. They had to, just the Gareth Bale factor and their big tournament experience in this team the last few years. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really interesting, the comments coming in. Lee P has a good one here. What do we think of Canada's group? We haven't spoken too much about them. It's tough, right? Group F, Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco. Do we see Canada getting out of that group? Andy?
They can. They definitely can. I think it's going to be a similar formula to what we've seen from the U.S. in past tournaments, where they're going to need to go in and probably need to defend better than they did through most of World Cup qualifying. And I think that's going to be very, very key for them. I think you can probably write off the Belgium game for them, and they can really focus on Morocco and Croatia, trying to take 4 points, ideally 6 from those two games. They've got the talent, and similar to the U.S., there are individuals on that team that are continuing to develop and to grow who have never been in these situations. None of them have ever been in this situation before, and so it will be a new thing. They might be a little bit wide-eyed going into the tournament, and so that there's a lot of factors at play for Canada right now that the U.S. has dealt with in the past, and I always kind of liken those two to one another, with the progressions as the footballing nations, the U.S. being 10, 15 years ahead just in terms of starting up the development of young players, having a domestic league, all of those very, very important kind of grassroots things here back at home before you begin to look on the larger scale around the world and putting players into Europe. So they've got an opportunity, and the fact that Canada is in the World Cup, it's, having a third or potentially fourth giant in CONCACAF that can really make themselves part of the furniture going forward, and somebody that has to be reckoned with and has to be upset and establishing themselves. CONCACAF is really healthy right now, and that's with Mexico being, I don't know, Nick, in our lifetimes, the worst that they've ever been.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Even the year that they finished and had to go to the playoff, everybody kind of looked at them like, how did that happen? Right. I mean, that was kind of the element there. Listen, Canada, I think, is in a really okay position. Belgium's going to win that group unless they totally fall apart. This is the thick part of a golden generation. You can trot out Tielemans and De Bruyne in the same midfield. You're pretty good. But you look at any of those other teams, and it's about stopping the attacking threats that Morocco have, who are creative. It's about the attacking threats all over that group. And I just look at what Canada did. They had good tactical plans. It wasn't until, Herdman got the better of Berhalter in that first game in the United States. And here's the one thing I'll say. The CONCACAF goalkeepers, if Costa Rica makes it, the U.S. may have the worst starter of the group, regardless of who starts. Boyan's incredible for Canada. Ochoa is becoming a bit of a Pulisic nemesis, even with the goals that Christian scored against Mexico. There have been some big saves there. And if Navas makes it, I mean, he's the reason that's the other thing about the Costa Rica game that we didn't mention. Another goalkeeper in there, and it's 2-0 US at halftime easy. Navas was fantastic.
Okay, I want to finish with some more comments and questions coming in. Brendan Purcell, a really good comment here. This is our World Cup to show who we are. The next 8 years will be the best World Cup squad the US has ever had. Yes. We get out of the group and the quarters are within reach this year. So again, I think US fans are feeling pretty positive after, as you said, not the best qualifying campaign ever, but they got the job done and now they're there. It's kind of opened up a little bit. And on that kind of topic about the group opening up and that side of the bracket opening up, Davis Shea says the group stage games are very nervy. FIFA should not map out the past before it starts. All teams should be reseeded after the groups to encourage more attacking football. Thoughts? I've never thought about it like that, but that's actually a really good suggestion, right? It's almost reset.
Yeah.
And it stops like dead rubber games where teams are just playing for a draw and both happy with a point. That's actually a really good suggestion. Well done, Dave.
Yeah, I think the only reason you can do that is probably because of rest time between the group stage and then the knockouts, right? And so you would have some teams playing 4 days later and teams that haven't played for like 8 days. That would probably be the one reason. But as just a pure competitive standpoint, I would be all for that.
In our lifetime, I want a tournament to have the guts to reseed after the group stage and have the first team pick their opponent. I mean, I've wanted this.
Yes.
I've wanted this in the NBA for a while. Like, imagine LeBron comes out and there's the 16 playoff teams. And he goes, I want Cleveland. Like this is. I would love to see that. I would love to see England have to walk to the podium and with the first pick we select the United States. Like, this is what I want to see. That's what I advocate for.
This was epic, this World Cup draw show. So thanks so much for joining me, lads. Thanks everyone for in the comments and getting your questions in. It's been brilliant. You've been joining us from all over the world and we love it. And at Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com, we'll have you covered of all the reaction from this great draw. And ahead to the World Cup in November, we'll tell you where you can watch it on Telemundo in the USA, our Spanish language partners. We'll have videos, live stream information, all the latest news ahead of the World Cup. But I think the big headline is that Group B, England, USA, Iran, and then one of Wales, Scotland, or Ukraine. That was a big headline to come out of it for us guys. And we'll be talking about that a lot in the days, weeks, and months to come. So only 6 and a bit months, I guess 6 to 7 months now to go until the World Cup starts in Qatar. So the countdown is on, the draw has been done, and it's been a pleasure to have you with us and for everyone joining us. So thanks so much, guys. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll speak to you all very soon indeed. Cheers.